Speaker.
Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Musical chairs was a game that was fun, wasn't it, at birthday parties when we were growing up? That idea that everyone, you put a bunch of chairs out there and the music started, and when the music stopped, there was one less chair than what there were partygoers. And so someone dipped out, and then another chair was taken away, and the music would start again, and on it would go. That is what this government is doing with social housing. They are taking the chair away and making sure that there is less and less provision for higher and higher demand and need. And that's what the Labour Party finds so offensive about this bill, is it doesn't even aim to address the stripping out of capital funding that this government has undertaken with Housing New Zealand. Because, Mr Speaker, I think through the course of the debate that we heard earlier, the Minister didn't even refute the facts that the Salvation Army put before this country just last week. The facts that the National-led government has only provided the Housing Corporation with $129 million in capital contributions in its first 3 years. And yet it required $271 million in dividends. That's a result of a net $142 million withdrawal of fundings from the organisation. But it's not just a withdrawal of funds, Mr Speaker, it is a withdrawal from the building of state houses and the replenishment and the increasing of the stock of social housing in this country. And so until the government gets to grips with that fact, then Sam Lotoinga's young pregnant woman living in the garage hasn't got a hope. She is not going to actually get a decent house, decent roof over the head of her young 2-year-old who he described. Never mind the forthcoming baby, because that government is not doing anything to add to the housing stock, the social housing stock. And so all the weeping and wailing, although I'm sure it was genuine actually, because I'm sure when that woman dragged Sam Lotoinga into that garage to see that situation, I'm sure that he genuinely felt horror at what he saw. But this is not the solution. This is not the solution. And if there are people who have high incomes, who should no longer be in state houses, who have other options to go to, then why isn't the government doing that good old-fashioned thing of actually getting the Housing New Zealand staff to negotiate with them and talk to them and find something that is more suitable for their needs? Because that's what used to happen under Labour. That's back in the day, though, when actually you could actually talk to a real person from Housing New Zealand. That's back in the day before the minister who's introduced this bill into the House took the face of Housing New Zealand away, turned it into an 0800 number. Actually, that might have been from the member who just resumed his seat. I'm quite unfairly lambasting the current minister for this. But this government has now hidden Housing New Zealand behind a wall of phone banks. The 0800 number that not only can not any average citizen get through to and get an answer from, but I know that members opposite will be having the same problem as well, that even MPs' offices can't get an answer from the 0800 number from Housing New Zealand. Oh, well, Judith Collins says illiterate MPs can. Well, she's wrong. She's absolutely wrong about that. That illiterate MPs and list MPs and councillors and New Zealanders are actually finding that their phone calls are not getting answered and they're not able to get through to the person with the answer that they need. And if Judith Collins doesn't accept that that is the reality, then she is just demonstrating over and over again how out of touch she is, and and the entire national government is with what's going on. Well, they are out of touch. And I think that demonstrates it, that Judith Collins thinks that the 0800 number is working perfectly well. It is, she says. Well, can all those New Zealanders who are listening to this debate please email judith.collins@parliament.govt.nz and tell her about the many occasions in which they have not got satisfaction from using the 0800 number, because she doesn't seem to know. She's completely out of touch with it. So the government has hidden the Housing New Zealand that used to engage with tenants. Oh, look, Judith Collins showing how out of touch she is all over again. According to her, judith.collins@parliament.govt.nz, everything's tickety-boo with Housing New Zealand. So I just would like to ask every New Zealander who's ever had a problem with Housing New Zealand, email now. Or she's actually quite active on Twitter. Get on Twitter and tell her your problems. I think it's at Judith Collins, is it? Is that the Twitter? That'll do. Look, just look for it. Look for the nastiest comments you can get on Twitter, and you'll get onto that member's Twitter feed. Just get onto Twitter right now, New Zealanders, and give Judith Collins all of your very real life experiences of dealing with Housing New Zealand, because it seems that she actually needs to hear them right now, because that minister is completely out of touch. She thinks that everything is sorted with housing in New Zealand. She doesn't get it, and it's like the government's denial of the housing crisis. Have we ever heard that? Their absolute denial that there is a housing crisis in New Zealand. So again, any New Zealander who's finding it tough to buy a home or rent a home, judith.collins@parliament.govt.nz or Twitter. Twitter would do just as well, because I think she really does need to know exactly what's going on in the housing market, because they don't seem to get it, that there is a housing crisis. But, Mr Speaker, back to this bill. This bill doesn't actually address the needs that New Zealanders have. It certainly doesn't address the needs that New Zealanders have. In fact, what it does is it makes some of the most vulnerable in our society, makes their tenancies so much less secure. And what more fundamental social need in this country than the right for people to have a decent roof over their heads? The right for children to know that they're going to be able to go to their neighbourhood school because they're not going to be moved on unfairly by a faceless, nameless bureaucrat in Housing New Zealand, hasn't even got the decency to just go and have a conversation, go and actually have a negotiation, go and talk with people about their options. They're no longer going to need to do that, because this government wants to take the lazy approach instead of actually legislating people's rights away, of actually legislating security of tenancy away from these people, and just saying, yes, they are the most vulnerable in our society, but really they're not going to take the time to have any discussion with them.
The honourable member. This debate is interrupted. The House is suspended until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.